Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Karlena Lara-Otera, and I'm a genetic counselor specialized in hereditary cancer. And I have the pleasure to present this topic along with Marisol Rosas and Cielo Rosas. And welcome to the 13th Annual FORCE meeting. The topic that we're going to present today is about the genes between us and how families share genetic information within or with their Latinx, Latino, Hispanic relatives. Marisol and I are both FORCE volunteers, and neither of the presenters today have conflict of interest to disclose. What you see in your screen right now is a graphic representation of the Rosas family tree. You see a series of circles and squares, and those represent females and males respectively in the family. And the colors that you see inside of some of these individuals represent cancer diagnosis. We call this in the genetics clinic a pedigree, and it's a very helpful tool to assess the chances that cancers can run in families. So I want to give you guys a little bit of context or background information to provide some context for the important conversation we're going to have with the Rosas sisters. And I want to provide, oh my God. Okay. So I want to provide some background information to give some context for the important conversation we're going to have with the Rosas sisters. We're going to be talking about hereditary cancer. And this is a very rare type of cancer that is caused by a non-working cancer gene that is passed down from parents to children. Genetic testing can help us identify the cancer gene mutation or genetic variation that is responsible for the cancers in a given family. Those individuals who have the familial mutation have a higher than average risk of developing cancer. Doesn't mean that they have cancer at the moment they are told they have the mutation. It doesn't mean that they will have cancer. It tells us that they have a higher vulnerability to specific types of cancer. And it's very important to identify those relatives in the family who have the mutation so we can provide early detection and prevention strategies, which is the ultimate purpose of offering genetic testing to families who could have hereditary cancer. We also have to recognize that letting relatives know about the presence of a mutation in the family related to cancer risk can be very difficult and complicated. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. How do we communicate that information to our loved ones? Other piece of information that I think is important that we go over for a little while is that across the years, Hispanic and Latino, Latinx families have either been forced or motivated to move away from the countries of origin. This could be because of political, social, economical reasons, and this has led to our families to be, in a lot of occasions, physically dispersed. And we know that that often can lead to communication gaps. Not being able to talk to our relatives often lead to those communication spaces. We know that also amongst our families and communities, the communication and health matters can be influenced by many factors, including religious, socioeconomic, educational, cultural, that can, again, impact the way we talked about health matters. And another important piece of information is there is a vast number of literature that shows that Hispanic, Latinx, and other people of color or minorities do have a diminished access to care. And this could be because of language barriers, less ability to acquire or have insurance. And another important factor is limited availability to genetic services, particularly, again, this is a specialty service. And not only within the United States, there are access these services, but also we think about of countries of origin, not necessarily the access, but the availability is also significantly limited as compared to the United States. So, okay, there is a gene mutation in the family. Now what? How do I tell about this? When am I ready to talk about this? How can I have this conversation and start this conversation? Who do I tell first? And all of these questions are what Marisol and Ros and Cielo are going to help us answer and give you, the audience, some background and things that can help you start these conversations or move this conversation forward wherever you are in this journey. So I want to bring now Cielo and Marisol Rosas.
Hi.
Welcome both.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this important story with the audience. I want to go back to giving a little bit more context to this family tree. Let me say that I'm so sorry to see that you have lost loved ones to cancer, and that you have had so many relatives dealing with this devastating disease. So to give the audience a little bit of context, I have highlighted the key players for our topic today. So we have here what we're going to call cousin C. She is your mom's first cousin, or was your mom's first cousin, and she was the first relative in the family who was told about genetic testing and that was able to access genetic testing and have a test result that showed that she had a BRCA1 mutation. So she was the first person in the family to find an answer to this diagnosis. Your family was known to have, or was identified to have, a BRCA1 gene mutation. And for those in the audience who are not familiar with that, BRCA1 is a gene that is associated with hereditary forms of breast and ovarian cancer, primarily when it's not working properly. But also there is a higher chance for other cancers like prostate, pancreatic, and melanoma. So here, highlighted with a star, because they are our stars today, we have Marisol and Marisol and Cielo. So I want to start by asking you, Cielo, and again, thank you so much for joining us today. Have you ever heard that cancer can run in families? Did you ever heard of such a thing called hereditary cancer? Tell me a little bit about that.
I've heard about it now with the information we have, but not before, not when my mother had breast cancer, and then 6 years later, ovarian cancer. We have not heard about the running in the family.
I see. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey when cousin C, I knew about her diagnosis of the BRCA1 mutation?
Well, as soon as she found out, I mean, she was really trying to tell us all, for the rest of the relatives, because a lot of the cousins had suffered the breast cancer, to get tested. But we didn't have the information there is right now. So in my case, my cousin C doctor, I went with her once to see him, and he told me, get tested. And he even wrote the order for me to get tested in San Diego, for example. But I went home and talked to my other, not to Marisol, to my other 3 sisters. And I said, look what the doctor says, to get tested. And then my sister says, why do we want to know? We don't want to know that we're going to have it. So you know what? Let's not do it. Now I know my big ignorance on the subject.
Thank you, Cielo. And I think that's not uncommon to hear, particularly in the early years when, recently after or soon after discovering this gene, this important genes, there wasn't a lot of information to go through for families, okay, or to go off for families. Like, what is this going to tell me? What is it going to impact my health, my decision making? Because I understand you shared with me that even before we knew about BRCA1, existed, you have decided to make some medical decisions based on your family history.
I did take some decisions because of my mother's problems. I decided not to take the hormone therapy after I got my menopause. But I got scared when I was her age, like at 47, 48. I got a tumor in my ovaries, and I really thought I had the cancer, but I was lucky enough. I didn't know about the BRCA at that moment.
Right.
So everything out because of my mother's history. I mean, that's my story. I suffered the menopause very younger than I was supposed to, and I didn't take any replacement therapy because of what the information that was there at that moment. So I really suffered the menopause really hard.
Right. And I'm sorry to hear that. And one thing I wanted to let the audience know is that this happened around the time when BRCA1 was about to be discovered. So you did the best you can to protect yourself from going through what your mom went through. So now fast forward, more recent years. Marisol, do you want to tell me, when did you learn about the mutation in the family?
Yes, I learned it. I learned about it around the same time my sisters did. I was living in Mexico City, and I was in my late 20s. And similar as Cielo, I was like, what am I going to do with this information? I was scared about it because I saw my mother suffer the illness and died from it, sadly. So I knew there was something going on. I didn't know what to do about it. So I just had it in the back burner. I was living in Mexico City, didn't know what to do with that information at the moment. It was until I moved to the States about 10 years after I moved to the States. I had my second son, and I was always very diligent in my revisions and screening and all that stuff, right? But in one of the screenings, they found a calcification in my breast, and I felt like I think similar as Cielo, I felt like I had cancer already, and they said it was not. But then there was 10 years after we knew, right? Now the doctor informed me, actually gave me a brochure about the force, and told me about the risk. And then I realized it's time for me to get tested. I've been dreading this, and I've been having it in the back of my mind. And now it's time to do something about it. I was better informed. And I went and got tested.
Good. So it looks like it took some time for you to really put these two pieces together.
Yes.
The cancer diagnosis in the family, the BRCA1 mutation, and your own personal state in life, right? You were in a different country. You were 10 years more mature, more experienced. So you felt ready at that time. Okay.
I had more information and more access to it as well, to the testing.
Right. And that's something that I wanted to bring up later about that piece of information about access, because I think that can really impact somebody's decision, right? Around telling, around wanting to know. So yeah, we're going to touch on that in a moment. So, Marisol, after you learn you have the BRCA1 mutation, and you make all your decisions around that, when did you feel ready to tell your family members, and who did you tell first?
Okay. Even though I knew there was a high risk because of my cousin already telling me, and because living of my mother's death, I knew there was a possibility, but it's still a shock when you receive the news, right? And I was not prepared. I first told my husband, then immediately my sisters, and my sisters and my brothers as the immediate family. And of course, for them, it was a sense of urgency now that it was so near. And now that I gave them the information, like you can get to, I was living in St. Louis, but I told them you can get tested in San Diego. I got him a terrific genetic counselor like you. And they traveled to San Diego to all get tested at the same time.
Right.
And
Go ahead.
And it was helpful that I knew now about this information. I was like, they didn't have insurance, no anything like that. But since I got tested and I did have insurance, it was a single site. In those times, it was really expensive. Now it's a little bit more accessible. No?
Right. And for the audience who don't know what single site means, that's when there is a mutation in the family and the laboratory just goes exactly and look for that alteration only. So that at the time was a more, affordable test. And then, as Marisol says, things are changed a little bit, or I would say a lot now.
A lot.
Yeah. So, Cielo, when you learn now that your baby sister has the mutation, right? That has impacted so many of your relatives. How did that sit with you? What went through your head? And when did you decide to do testing after learning of Marisol's result?
It was also a shock for us. I mean, how do you think we felt? Our baby sister having this that my mother had. I mean, it was really very sad. We were very sad about it. But she started us working. Okay, what do we have to all do? I mean, somebody might have it too. One of us, we're six siblings. So we tested immediately. I don't know the time, but it was really very soon. I mean, we didn't think about it. We talked to all the rest of the family and we said, let's do it. And we'll have to do whatever we have to do to avoid getting it if we can.
So it sounds like this time around, when you have a lot more information, that 10 years ago, the decision was a lot easier. So
Yes.
This time was like a no-brainer for you.
Exactly. That's what we did. And we got together and the 5 of us got tested on the same day, on the same place. We got counseling from the genetist. So we just worked.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm glad to hear that you guys are a perfect example of what we expect happen after we tell a patient there is a mutation in the family. We want this communication to flow as easy and breezy as we would want, but we know that that's not the case. We know that that's not always what happens. So Marisol, would you share with us an example of, you have a big family, right?
Yes.
In a big family, everybody's different. So tell me a little bit about a relative that didn't receive the information as well, and what that reaction looked like.
Yes, I think, and it's since we have a big family, like you said, and it's like a cliche Mexican family. There's all the variety of decisions and processing of receiving the information. I had cousins that had also had cancer in their family, so the reaction, they were thankful but didn't know where to go after that. So I could help them, either helping them bringing them to the States or getting tested, but they wanted to do something about it, but they didn't know what. And for me, sometimes it was frustrated because they were in Mexico and other countries, so you don't know exactly how to help them. And I think it's very important to mention that when you speak in the States with a genetic counselor like you, usually they have access to other information for other countries. They have networks and connections that are always helpful. So, but that's easy when they're open to receiving the information. I have had cousins that they go, okay, thank you for they're polite. Thank you for the information, but I'm not going to do anything with it. So I've learned with time and also with force to be respectful. For my peace of mind, I'm making sure that they know. If they want more information, they'll ask, and I will give them anything they want. I mean, any information, any personal information, what I went through, I'm an open book, but I also don't pressure anybody if they don't want to hear it. It's tough to receive. And I think also I've had also cousins that said they don't want to hear it, but then they talk about their kids and now they worry more. Because I think when you personally you think you're going to be fine or something, but then you worry about your kids. It's something else. Yeah. That's what happened to me anyway.
Right. So that's another important aspect that you bring into the picture, is that sometimes relatives are not ready to do something for themselves, but the love that they feel for their siblings, their parents, their children do motivate them to do what we consider to be the right thing. Okay. So I'm so glad that you are proactive and reaching out, and what you mentioned is so true. There's so much you can do, because one thing that we've seen is that pushing somebody to do something they don't want can just bring negative consequences. Like, let's say they do the testing, let's say the test positive, they're going to regret it. They did it. They were not ready to receive that information. They're going to resent you for pushing them. So I think that's a very important point. Don't push anybody that is ready to do anything. Just do your due diligence as you guys are doing. Share the information, give them the resources that can let them to make their own decisions, whether it's for themselves, for their children. So I think that's a very, very important point to bring up. Now, Marisol, you mentioned something that is extremely important, and it's an unfortunate reality, and it's that some individuals, particularly our family members that lived in our countries of origin, that don't have the advancement in technology, or they do have it, is significantly costly. Has that influenced your decision about telling the results to a relative that is not going to have easy access to
it? To a certain, before, yes, because now after 10 years, not so much, because I know there's more access. But before, when I found out, you feel the need to share that, like the sense of urgency to share the information. But then you realize that we're blessed living in the States when the insurance covers prophylactic surgeries and stuff like that, and not over there. So I was like, I'm telling you that the boogeyman is coming for you, but there's nothing you can do about it. So right. that was not great. But now there's more information, there's increased surveillance, and I think as long as I was able to communicate the risk, and I think that's why I love Force, it's empowering people to know you can make your own decisions. Like you've always mentioned, it's not a death sentence. It doesn't mean you have to have the surgeries. Just be aware of what your options are, because you can always have the screening. It doesn't mean you're not going to get cancer, but you're probably going to catch it in time. And depending on what mutation you have, of course, right? It's always, and I'm still learning. Force has always been a blessing and a lot of information. And I always, now that they also have a Spanish links and Spanish information that was not before, I can send family links and you can go read it in Spanish, right?
Exactly. At your own time, without having that language barrier.
Without me pressuring them, and
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. This is so important, Marisol, because we think about giving our sometimes we think about giving our families like information that is heavy, it's important, is consequential, but then we're also worried, like, what are they going to do with that information? So and I think, and what I'm seeing in your family is that things have changed with time, right? Mm-hmm. Before there was no information, very limited access. Now things are more, the information flows more readily, easily. There's access in the different languages. There's more access to care. They're grateful to have you to help them navigate those very difficult healthcare system, because it is difficult. But now I wanted to go back to Cielo and ask you, there's going to be relatives that are going to test negative, right? And that also comes with their set of feelings and emotions, right? So we want to also be knowledgeable and aware of those relatives who are going to go through this process and going to come out of the other end with not having the mutation, not having to go through what other relatives have to go through, decision-making about surgeries, even potentially diagnosis of cancer. So that also comes with their set of emotions and thoughts and feelings. So Cielo, you are one of those relatives. You tested negative for the BRCA1 mutation that is considered a true negative. You don't have the risk factor that is associated with the cancer in your family. Your cancer risk doesn't disappear, but significantly decreases. So you have average risk, right, for cancer is what we consider. How did you feel and thought when you got that negative result? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, of course, relieved. That's the first thing that you feel, even though we were so worried about my baby sister. But the truth is, we felt the relief. That's exactly what the doctor had told me 20 years ago. Get peace of mind. Forget about it. And if you have it, there's many things we can do. But if you don't have it, have your peace of mind, which we didn't. Now I know. And it really helps, because it helps you to make many other decisions. If you have other surgeries or other problems, you're not going to deal with that. So
right, exactly.
for many things, it helps.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you got the lucky draw that, right?
Yeah.
We do know that some relatives who test negative in the context of a family who has a mutation, they sometimes feel something called survivor's guilt. That is absolutely normal. And for those relatives and for those in the audience who may have somebody like this in their family, just be compassionate. And if you are one of those people who test negative and are dealing with some of this survivor guilt, know that is normal. Take your time to enjoy your results. You don't have the risk. Give yourself permission to, as Cielo is now grateful for that result and that new information and the new sense of freedom as Cielo is presenting. Reach out for help if you're feeling, because that could feel isolating, right? At some point that could feel isolated, you guys. Like, Marisol has the mutation, other cousins have the mutation. So they have this kind of like, you call it a link if you want. And then those who test negative, sometimes if the family is not as cohesive as yours, they might feel isolated. They might feel like they don't belong. So, again, give yourself permission to feel all of those feelings and reach out for help if you feel like it's taking you some time to get over it, to not get over it, but like going through it. Okay.
No, I think you bring a good point, because the feelings are strange and isolating, and I think it's great to talk about it to a genetic counselor or somebody, or a peer navigator, to either feelings, like the guilty or not. And I think you touched the point, feeling guilty also in a way when some relatives don't want to get tested because they don't want to know that they're positive, and they know they're sending this to their kids. I feel that guilt. I know in my mind that I have absolutely no control of passing the genes to my kids, but I feel the guilt and I feel nervous, and they're young still, and I haven't gotten them tested, and they're boys, which is a little bit, the risks are different, right? But you really have to talk that through to exactly be okay with it. And in my case, with my brothers and sisters, I saw it as I was the youngest one. I was the only one that was in time to do something about it, and I'm happy that they don't have the mutation.
Right. So this is a very functional way of responding to the situation. And again, I cannot be more glad that you guys have this dynamic communication, open communication, understanding, supportive. This is what we want to see. And I hope that, if there are people in the audience who are not experiencing those relationships, it's okay. Families are different. Families are complicated. Relationships can be physically and emotionally distant. One of the things that I think is most important is do some introspection. Like, you have either a positive or negative result. Try to work through those emotions and try to see where is this coming from. Is it because I don't realize that I don't have control of where the card was dealt when I was born? Where is that fear, guilt coming from? And again, that's something that can be helped. You can process that by talking to somebody, a confidant, a friend, somebody else in the family, maybe somebody else that also tested negative. Find some alliance. If you don't have that, reach out to your doctor, healthcare provider, because
the peer navigation program at Forest.
Peer navigators, that's a wonderful resource. That's a wonderful resource. I think meeting with even a stranger, but that has a similar experience to you, is so valuable, because people can give you different perspectives that for whatever reason we have not considered before. So I'm not sure how we're in time, but I think we have gone through a lot of important aspects of how communicate information with our family members. Once there is a mutation in the family, so I wanted to provide some take-home points. And I was making a reference of this just a moment ago. once you have told you have a mutation, I think it's extremely important for you to take your time to digest that information. Understand what it means for that mutation to be present in your body now and for the rest of your life. Do you feel stressed out and anxious, still thinking about that when you learned about the results like maybe a month, 2 months ago? If you're not there yet, then you're not ready to share this information. Maybe you need to talk to your genetic counselor, to somebody else, a peer who you have identified through FORCE peer navigation program, somebody. Make sure before you're telling anybody that you're ready to do so, right? Because sometimes when we have to convey important information, people are going to ask us questions, right? And we feel insecure about what it means to have that mutation. We don't feel calm when we think about that. Maybe it's not the right time, right? Because you're not only conveying the information about the virus and mutation, but you're also, run the risk of conveying all of these other feelings and emotions that can impact, your relatives, decisions around it. Okay. Have some resources at hand. Maybe write things down. Like, this is what I want to tell. This is other people I want to tell. This is I want to tell first. One of the things that if you undergo genetic testing through a genetic counselor, with a genetic counselor, is a pretty universal practice for genetics clinics to provide a document called a family letter. That is a document that we create with the sole purpose of family communication. We write it in simple language. We put key information about the mutation that has been identified, the risk of what the patient would need if they also are found to have a mutation, and where to get this done. As Marisol said, we have the ability, when I say we say genetic counselors, genetic clinics, we know that our families could be dispersed around the world. So we have ways to identify genetics professionals in your relatives area. And if there's no one readily available, we do the best we can to find one, or talk to you about, alternatives, sending your family members a genetic testing kit, things like that. And, lastly, if you have gone through all of this and you still need more resource and more support, reach out for help. FORCE has wonderful resources. Reach out to your doctor, reach out to your genetic counselor, to your genetics navigator. There is a lot of people out there that can help you. And the person who helped you through the process of getting tested, if a genetic counselor, that is the key person you want to, keep on your team. We're here to help you guys and help facilitate this communications. Talk to you through if you're having a hard time. Hey, my sister doesn't want to hear about it. What can I do? We're not going to tell you to for your sister's score. We're just going to listen to you. Okay. I want to finally provide some resources. FORCE, of course, is a wonderful, wonderful source of information for not only people with, hereditary cancer, but also people in the family, right? Again, those relatives who test negative, they have supports for them as well. And I also wanted to leave you guys here with the National Society of Genetic Counselors website. There is a link to find a genetic counselor in your locality. So this is something that you can share with your relatives. Hey, if you need to do this testing and you leave, of course, I wanted to point out that this is in the United States, but you can provide this information to your relatives. They can reach out to a local genetics clinic. And if you need international assistance, your genetic counselor will be the person to help you. So, Cielo, Marisol, thank you so much for sharing your story. You cannot imagine how valuable it is for us to get a pic of what your journey has been. Again, I'm so glad to have you been open and vulnerable to this, discussion to help others that might be going through similar situations. So thank you so much.
Thank
Okay.
you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I'm glad.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.